Alberto, thank you very much for being here. This is the next episode of the Lighthouse. Really simple. It's a platform that's connected to our nonprofit, Hola Data. And the whole purpose of the Lighthouse is to be a platform and a light for those that have already made their way, are successful, and to really share their stories, share how they got there, and share kind of what they learned along the way for the next generation, and to really pass down and be an inspiration to others. So, Alberto, why don't you tell us about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got here?
First of all, I must say it's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed with the idea and the concept of what you guys are doing with the Lighthouse. Much needed. So it's good to have someone leading the team and becoming part of one if eventually we can help out. So thanks for having me. Well, I must say I'm an architect, born and raised in Mexico City, small little town of 25 million. I'm the fifth of 5 children.
The youngest. Okay.
My parents, as you may very well imagine, Catholic. We all went to private schools. We had the opportunity of our father, who didn't go to a private school, see us through private school. So that was interesting and a good effort, no? I studied architecture, and I must say I'm not sure if it was because of the fun and creative part of architecture, or basically because I had very good friends going into architecture. But I ended up being an architect, and I'm fine with that. We started a company, and I say we because I have a partner, and we've been partners for the last 38 years. We created Gaya, and Gaia started out being a corporate space planning and interior design firm. At that time, which was 1986, we were kind of the weirdos in the block, you know. Can you do my home? No, we do office space. Can you do my shop? No, we do office space. So at the end, our stubbornness, we'd like to think it was a bit of luck, but also a bit of saying, this is very different to what people are used to. You know, the image of the architect being universal and being capable of doing anything. Yeah. And we said, no, we need to focus on something that's a niche in the market, but that has the economics and potential to grow if you do it stubbornly, but firmly, no? And we stuck to corporate offices. And I must say, we did become the leader, if it sounds cocky, pretty fast, because some other corporations that were international established in Mexico, and I must mention one that came from England, at some point said, I'm out of here. The market in Europe and in the US is big enough, and they left Mexico, kind of saying, they'll never get it. They're still used to having this global architect designing homes, shops, whatever, hotels, office spaces. So we stuck to office spaces. And at some point, the client said, guys, you understand what we do and the corporate standards that we would like to see reflected in our design. How did you manage that? Why would you do that in Mexico? A couple of arquitectos, no? And Fernando trained himself in London, where he spent 4 years.
Is Fernando your partner?
He's my partner.
He's your partner, okay.
And when he invited me over to create Gaia, as soon as we opened shop, about a year later, I went to Paris to train myself in corporate interior space planning. So at some point, our client said, guys, how do you manage this? So how are you able to understand that this is global, that the big corporations need to standardize quality, office space, hierarchies, look and feel, technology? And we said, well, we did train in Europe, but we brought it to Mexico. And at some point they said, okay, you do the good planning and the good design, and we're okay if we show you what we want and you get it. But the quality of the jobs on site and the finished product,
the construction of
is not there.
Got it.
So at some point we said, okay, perhaps we should walk that way. And we started doing design build for our clients. And I must say, it was interesting because when you're just on the design side of the table, you don't really look at the oddities and the complications in the construction. Yeah. So believe me, our detailing became a little bit more detailed once we knew.
Well, you're responsible now to execute it. Yeah, for sure.
And we got there and we grew. We grew for design build services. We even were the first company, and this is kind of the weirdness that when you're young and fearless, we became part of the DBIA, which is the Design Build Institute of America. And at that time, like I say, it was last century, we were kind of, why would a Mexican company come to the DBIA? Welcome, but we don't get it because we do this, and that. Oh, it makes sense. And we learned.
You can learn, yeah.
And we learned. And also, kind of the collateral benefits was that Gaia's name started moving a little bit in those circles. And suddenly we became the importer, and this was before NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement.
I'm very familiar with NAFTA.
And we found ourselves designing lamps, designing stools, benches, things that you could not import. They were just not cost effective. But we had this international client saying, but that's what I want.
You were designing furniture, for example, to be built in the U.S.
No, to be built in Mexico. Because to import.
You couldn't import it into Mexico.
That's right.
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
Or it was very expensive.
Got it.
And you'd have to go through customs and have licensings and blah, blah, blah. So we found ourselves designing and manufacturing things. So we really got into design build the hard way. But at some point, NAFTA got signed. I remember, and I don't know if it's okay to say names or brands, whatever.
Sure.
But
yeah, it's completely open.
The only two custom furniture for office space that you could find in Mexico at that time before NAFTA were Herman Miller and Knoll. And you can imagine the local economy simply could not afford those
100%,
imports,
100%.
No? It was not for everybody. For those global corporations, yes. But then they would say, guess what? I have a corporate agreement with Steelcase, or I have a corporate agreement with Hayworth, or I was like, who are those guys? Yeah. It was funny.
Huge in America, but who?
And in the worldwide, no? Yeah. So we started doing a lot of research and homework of what our clients wanted. That brought us to Neocon in Chicago, to IDC New York, to Milan in Italy to see, the old way of doing things. Now you press a button and you realize all the catalogs and all those specs and whatever's, no? But anyway, and suddenly we became top importers for certain brands for office space furnishings. And it was like, do you want a dealership? And we said, why would we? We're just speccing what our client needs and is accustomed to. Yeah, but nobody sells that in Mexico. You're the only guys importing this. And it was like, we were the weird ones again, no? So that was interesting. That was fun, but it was a huge learning curve. And like I say, the collateral was that somehow Gaia's name or brand started, going through the different channels and coinciding with clients, no? And it's interesting because through 38 years of being there, not much has changed in that sense. Is who do you know and since when? No?
Oh, yeah.
Now we know that people that started out in, in the trenches now are in high corporate places, but they're still the same guy. And we're still around, they're still around. And it's like, who do you trust at the end? No? Why would you do business with someone other than, okay, you have to be professional, you have to deliver, you have to be lawful, you have to sign contracts. But at the end is, who do you trust?
No, those are just the tickets to admission. Like it's the difference.
Those have to be checked out.
Those have to be guaranteed to even walk through the door. Yeah, 100%.
And it's an industry that we've seen it grow in Mexico. It's got more professional. And at some point, I must say, it's now even dragging some vices of the global industry along. Meaning, not necessarily everything has been good for the industry. But it's grown and it's professionalized. You'd be amazed that when we started doing the design build, in construction on site for interiors, corporate interiors, people wouldn't wear helmets. People wouldn't wear gloves, glasses, boots, identifications. It was like, sorry to say, but the Mexican way. And we proved them wrong. The Mexican way now is the global way. It's taking time, it's taken money, effort, but we've managed to not do it the Mexican way and do it the new Mexican way, I must say, no? In that sense, we've worked and grown from doing corporate interiors into some base building. We've done base building for corporate, but also we've moved into what we call different segments, market segments, meaning one of them for the past 22 years, data centers. And again, it was history repeating itself because we were the fools aiming at data centers. And that industry has changed dramatically. You're all guys part of it.
Yeah. It's all I've ever known. So it's all I've ever done. I've done a little bit of commercial when I first got out of school, hotels, high rises.
Okay.
But other than that, it's been nothing but data centers for 20 years.
Fantastic. And for us, we managed to tend a couple of clients, I must say, one being 80% of what we did those 20 some years.
Got it.
But it was funny because the size of the data centers we did, and we considered ourselves, quote unquote,
Experts?
the specialists or the experts.
What was the smallest? What was the first size of the first deployment?
Well, 1.2 megas.
So it wasn't the megawatt. I didn't even think you were going to say in the megawatts yet.
If you could consider that a data center, no, formally. And we did, it's like our first data center of that capacity.
Was it a room?
We were used to doing data rooms or sites that got close to half a
mega, 400 kW.
And you'd ask, is this a data center? And it depended who you asked. We were that ignorant. No, it's just a big site. Okay, let's address it like a big site. If we were to address it as a data center, we would have been a little bit more nervous, I guess. But we did it for banks. We did it for not direct government institutions, but people that needed to move a lot of information. But when we did what we call our first official was 1.2. But now things are just getting, if you ask me, compared to those times, out of hand. I mean, the industry is growing tremendously fast. And I believe we've managed to surf the wave properly in the sense of the people we've gathered around us in our own team, but also the people that are in the industry. We are talking the same language. We're still learning. We are hurting from being, how can I say this properly in English, part of a very fast growth pace. You know that any industry that grows fast, people tend to drop the ball at some point. And the important thing is to do your multidisciplinary teams as tight as possible. And that's something we've learned. You never can bite more than you can chew. And that we're very conscious about. In a certain interview at some point for a big data center, the question from the guy responsible for it asked me, can we do a tour of the data centers you've built in Mexico? And I said, okay, yeah, sure. But I need to see 24 megawatt data centers. And I said, if anybody says that they've built the one in Mexico, they're lying. At that point, that was reality in Mexico because nobody had built one.
It just didn't exist.
So it was fun, no, to see like, yeah, we're doing homework, but as far as I know, it doesn't exist yet, no, at that time. So it is a growing industry and we've managed. And going back to Gaia's progression, we are in the hotel industry also. We do some residential. But part of what we've understood also from the beginning is if you're going to address different market segments, you need to address them properly as P&L, no? This is one industry. Some things are measured in megawatts. Some things are measured in square footage. Yeah. Some things are measured in keys. Some things are measured differently, no? And I believe that's part of what Fernando, my partner, and I have been able to do, to understand the different industries and realize that you cannot exactly copy the same system, method, or whatever, no? There is a big base of how we do things, which I believe has been a differential, but you understand that every market has its own way of doing it. We say that you eat that plate with different silverware.
Utensils, yeah.
No. And also, again, I usually go back to people. The people that we've managed to keep in our team and to bring into a team are major difference of what we do and how we've accomplished to stay 38 years in the market. We work and we dropped doing design in-house quite a few years ago. I got fired by my own partner, meaning we decided as a business decision that the size of the pie in construction is big compared to the size of design. And in Mexico, we were getting a lot of foreign designs being built in Mexico. And just as in the beginning, we went to design build, the question for our clients was exactly the same. The designs are coming in from abroad. I don't need them local, but there's no quality in construction or good quality in the service of construction, not only the finished product. So it was a business decision. We fired me. We stopped doing design in-house.
You just moved over somewhere else probably.
And it was fun because at that time, HOK had a big office in Mexico. And I called our competitor on a Thursday and I said, can we have a meeting on Monday? Why would we? You know that last competition we had for this project?
It's gone.
We want you to design it. Why would we do that? You're my competitor. Not anymore. Why? We're not designing in-house anymore. It was Ricardo Masha, a good friend. And I said, Ricardo, it's yours. This is what we're doing. This is the time schedule and this is the fee. Can you manage? So we started doing teaming up with our competitors. And it was at first weird, but it was very honest, saying, guys, now we need to be on the same side of the table, selling your design services and our construction differential. No? And ever since, we've been proud of what we've been accomplishing as far as teaming up with the right people for the right processes. And like I tell our clients, we don't have all the answers, but we know where to look for them. I believe that's part of what needs to be the attitude to really do teamwork and find the key to success as a team. No? So yes, we've been having fun in different market segments. What else can I tell you?
Let's pause there. That's a fantastic story. I'm going to try to break it apart and kind of go through your story there in a little bits and pieces just to get our listeners to kind of get to know a little bit about you and your story. How big, just before we get that, how many employees right now does Gaia have?
Right now we're about 160.
160, and you're 100% in the construction industry.
Correct.
So no more design build. And how many offices? Just the one in Mexico City, or do you have more?
One in Mexico. Our strategy at some point, that's funny, we went into Latin America. We came back saying thank you.
Where did you go? I'm assuming Brazil or...
Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, Chile. But suddenly, what our trampoline to go to South America in that time was that we signed a very large contract for a certain amount of Regis office spaces, work centers, no? And some bright guys had the idea of crashing 2 planes into World Trade Center in New York. And I mean, from one day to the other, it was like,
stopped,
guys, let's have a tequila, rip the contract apart. It's not going to happen, no? But that was a good experience, meaning what we had already done for Regis in Mexico and Guatemala and some other place. They said, guys, would you be willing to go south? Yes, we did. And it was interesting. But I mean, it didn't make sense after that event, no? So we came back and we said, well, our backyard is big enough. We have a lot of work to do. We learned quite a bit from the experience of going into South America, and we made great relationships. Again, people factor, no? With whom we still do have relationships. And they are design builders, same as we were at that time. Some of them are only design, some of them are only contractors. But we created and we called it Planet Network with double N. Planet with a double N, Planet Network. And our idea was to create a network of clients saying, where can I find help, trusted help, down in South America? So we created that allegiance. And it worked for quite a few years, and then it simply tired out. But it was interesting, and we learned quite a bit. We still have relationships with some of the guys that we created in the network. And we address projects on a project-by-project basis if needed. No? And we came back to Mexico, and that's when we started saying, what can we do a little bit differently and not only in corporate? And the relationship with architects, suppliers, vendors, clients was, okay, what else can you deliver and how can you help me? So we started going into different industries. By that time, we had a couple of small data rooms or data centers under our belt, and we decided strategically to go aggressively after data centers. And that proved us good, and it's been a good investment in that sense.
That's fantastic. And where in Mexico do you build? Do you predominantly try to stay in the Mexico City, Querétaro area, or all over Mexico?
No, we've been all over the place. The country's our backyard. That's what we decided after the South America
all of Mexico
concept or idea. And it's funny because we've also seen technology change dramatically or drastically in these 38 years. And we were spending money on leasing office spaces in different cities that really don't make sense, and it's not part of what we do. If we have a client, we open shop at the client site. Why? Because now you have the methods and the tools to do it properly without having to pay a rent of a branch office. To some clients, it's been weird. Can I see your Monterrey office? And I said, I just closed it. Why? We were there for 11 years and not a single client went to the office space. That's a place where you put samples, where you threw a coffee pot. It was like, why would we still pay rent? It doesn't make sense. So we have, and now you have WeWork, which we did quite a few thousand square meters for WeWork. So you can have a virtual office if needed, just a small space.
Anywhere you need. Yeah.
And if you need a conference room, you program your visit, and that's as simple as it gets. And I believe it's smart thinking. Some others might want to see a physical office. We don't. And we're blunt about it with our clients. We're never having more rep offices. We did some hotels in Puerto Vallarta, the most beautiful beach house office space we've ever had. It had a pool. It had a, how do you call it? For cooking, as a grill. It had a grill. And the deal with the guy
who hired you guys?
No, the deal with the owner of the house that we leased was, your house is in shambles. Instead of paying rent, what we do is we build. Can we refurbish it? Boy, we left that house beautiful after a couple of years.
And you got free rent and a beautiful view.
Oh, free rent, Yeah. But it was the most beautiful space we had. And it really didn't make any sense because we were all day long on site. But it was a beautiful office space.
That's fantastic, Alberto. Okay. So your backyard is Mexico. Why don't we back up a little bit and just, I heard you mention you went to school to be an architect or arquitecto.
Correct.
Did you know growing up that that's what you like? How did you, or I guess even before that, how would you describe your upbringing? You said you went to private school, so I'm assuming your family had means. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, in the sense that I have one, how could you call it? Not theory, but, one way of thinking. As parents, nobody teaches us to be parents. You realize and you copy what you lived in your home or what you see that you like or don't like elsewhere. My father lost his father when he was 9. And as of 12, they were 7 brothers. Well, he started watching on his own and getting his own education and helping his sisters and getting jobs and whatever. So my theory is you have a base point from which you part. My father parted some way a little bit below where I did. Why? Because he managed through hard work, education, principles to deliver me to a different place forward. He started. So those baby steps or huge steps upwards, meaning education, means, socialization, traveling, whatever, is different. And I was lucky enough that he sent me to an American school. That's why I speak English almost fluent.
In Mexico?
In Mexico.
I mean, your English is fantastic, by the way.
And it's funny, I'm the 5th kid.
Okay.
But my other brothers and sisters did not go to an American school. At some point he said, I need this guy to understand and learn English. I don't know why.
Do your other four brothers and sisters
Went to different schools.
Do they speak English?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
But it was funny. I was, Alberto, you were always left behind somehow, forgotten about, bring Alberto along, the little one, no? But in my education, I was the only one to go to an American school. And again, we had the benefit of what my father didn't have, which was through effort and hard work. And I spent 1 year, 7th grade, in the US, which was also very interesting.
Where in the United States?
In Washington, D.C.
Okay. So very diverse.
A private religious school.
Okay. Catholic?
Catholic.
Okay.
And it was a tremendous experience. For me, it was before going to Washington and after going to Washington.
Was it a boarding school? Did you physically live there, or did you live with a family? Okay. What ethnicity was the family that you lived with? What ethnicity? Were they also Hispanic? Were they?
No. They were American, Irish origin.
Very fantastic. There's a lot of
basically from Pennsylvania that moved to Maryland and Washington.
There's a lot of similarities between the Irish community and the Irish. Just some of my best friends are Irish, and when you sit down and talk about family values and the way they think, religion, very similarities. I always say to my Irish friends
and these were fantastic people. It was interesting because when I got there, and again, this is 1976.
Okay.
Last century. When I got to the home, my luggage, Tom, this is Steve, this is Ed, this is Michelle, and this is Mrs. Gasvoda. And it was like, and where is Mr.? We just got a divorce. And it was, to Mexico culture, it was like, that word is a bad word.
Got it. At that time. Okay.
At that time, 1976, it was like, especially in my family being very religious. So it was like, long distance call. Hi, how are you doing? I'm fine. Yeah. Oh, can we speak to Mr. Gasvora? There's no Mr. Gasvora. It was like, it was, even that experience was different at that time.
And you were there for the whole school year?
Yeah.
Wow. How do you think that experience affected your growing up after that, whether it's the route,
it was before and after. It was fantastic. I'm a lot into sports, even now. I love sports, and sports has given me a means of communicating and relating with people that otherwise you wouldn't have. And a lot of what is interesting to understand is teamwork through sports. So my integration into that particular school and many other situations in my life has been through sports. Meaning, he's good at soccer. Well, he can play tennis. Well, he's not bad at baseball. So you start relating to people basically because you can do something.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
Physically.
All of a sudden you become one of them.
You're part of one.
You're part of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been a constant in my life, and it's something I've tried to bring to my kids. Through sports, you can integrate a lot with a lot of people. No? Not only watching in TV, which is mostly what kids do now, but practicing.
And playing.
Practicing. So, yeah, I'd say that, yes, Washington was a major, major difference in how I saw things, life, and just the fact of traveling and confirming my English. And I said, I don't know if I can, and I'm able to bring it to that level. Minimum for my kids, 7th grade, they're going to live in the US 1 year. And I managed. My 3 kids have been in 7th grade in Connecticut.
That's such I'm trying to think of how old you are at that age. 12, 13?
12.
12. Mm-hmm. Was it hard for you to, I think of my little boy is 8, soon to be 9. I can't fathom sending him somewhere at 12.
I'll tell you, for me, it was such a marvelous way of doing it. It gets hard, and you miss, and you cry, and they beat you up, and they throw you in the trash can, and they call you the spick, and la 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 la. First of all, the first impression was, why do you speak English?
Yeah.
It was like, well, I do. I learned English. It's not from Jupiter, So that was the first big impression on kids my age at that time, saying, why would a Mexican speak fluent English? It's a matter of studying, amigo. But yeah, there are hardships, but that makes your skin thicker.
Absolutely.
And you learn that culturally people are how they are because they don't know any better. Once they do, and they have you playing soccer and scoring goals, it's like, well, this Mexican guy, he's not that bad.
He's not that bad. He's pretty good at soccer. And he speaks pretty good English. Okay.
And he's fun to be next to. Or are people that culturally say, no, I'm not being friends with a Mexican. Well, that's your problem, not mine. So yeah, it had something to do with the upbringing, and I enjoyed it so much. And I believe my kids also, they referred to their, my kids are now 31, well, 32, 30, and 26, 2 boys and a girl. And they all went at 7th grade.
To Connecticut, you said?
Connecticut.
Okay.
And my wife was like, yeah, sure, we'll send them if we can. And when they started being 10, 11, I said, next year, what? You're kidding. No, I'm not kidding. We are doing this. And it'll be a major difference. And it was. They all went to the same school at different years, obviously. But they loved it. They loved it.
That's incredible. So you come back from living in the United States in 7th grade. You come back to the private school in...
A different one
in Mexico.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to highlight I want to go back for a second. Hearing you elaborate and describe the what your father's sacrifice and your father's work allowed you to have, it's probably the best representation of somebody describing that for me. And I only say that is whenever me and the other founders of Lighthouse, one of the commonalities that we have is we all have children, and we all are raising our children very differently than how I was raised. And a lot of that is because my parents afforded me the opportunity to have education, right? And so they were immigrants to the United States. They didn't have an education. They worked hard, and their way of work was very different to my way of work. But that enabled me to then go to school and have an education to do this kind of stuff. So now I look at how my kids are raising, it's night and day. And hearing you elaborate in such a good way was and very eloquently put, it's kind of cool. It made me smile because there's a lot of commonalities there. So I appreciate you wording that the way you did, Alberto.
And I'd be unfair if I left out a little bit more about my father. Like I say, my father had to see for himself and even help in his 7-kid home very early in life. He went to public schools. He managed scholarships. He managed work, summers, nights, whatever's. But that's one guy that ended up doing 2 majors in UNAM, wow. Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. He's an accountant. Well, he was an accountant. He's passed away. And business administration. And then he ended up doing an MBA in Harvard, all in his effort and by himself. So it's someone that came from very far away and narrowed the odds pretty much against him, towards him. He married my mother, who obviously was a little bit better off, if you may, with her father being a notary public. So that obviously is a little bit different. Yeah. But hardworking guy that really managed things for himself, and he demanded a lot from us also. No, it was, okay, you're having this opportunity, boy, if you screw it up. So he was very demanding, and I'm thankful for that. You might not like it at some point, that someone as close as your father really becomes a struggle. I guess that's normal when you're a certain age. Yep. But as you grow older, you realize, and I say, man, thanks. This gave me proportion, this gave me dimension, this gave me limits, and really focused me on what I should do. I'll give you another example, which was interesting. I mentioned that at some point, being a partner already with Fernando Gutierrez, my partner at Gaya, I left for Paris. He came back from London. We opened the shop. 1 year later, I go to Paris to train myself in corporate interiors, no? And my father drags Fernando to business school. And he says, guys, you're very creative, you're good, but this is a business. If not, you're not going to eat properly. That's one way of putting it, no? So he dragged him into business school.
In Mexico as well.
In Mexico.
Wow.
IPADE Instituto Panamericano de Alta Dirección de Empresas, which is a branch, you could call it the way they teach through case studies from Harvard. So that's a big
It's like an MBA type program. Okay.
And my father had his consultancy, but he was a full-time professor at IPADE. So you can imagine the pressure.
That's incredible. Your father sounds like an incredible man. I would have loved to meet.
Very demanding again, but fantastic.
You know, before we dive into you coming back from private school in Washington, I'm curious because I'm trying to find, I think I see another commonality that I've heard. You were the youngest of 5. I'm the youngest of 4. How much did your brothers and sisters have an influence in your life more from I guess the context that I'm giving you the question? For me, my brothers were more of a caretaker because my oldest is 20 years older than me. And then there's 10 years of separation and then there's 5.
Oh, wow.
And so
20.
It's 20 years.
That's almost a parent. No,
yes. So for a lot of ways, he was going to medical school, for example, in Mexico.
Which takes forever.
When I was a kid. And so he would come and visit the family and he would go to the school things for me. And so I learned a lot through them, what to do and what not to do. And they were more like a parent figure than anything else. I mean, now that we're older, like we're real brothers and we can have the brotherly conversations. But it wasn't until probably I was out of college that I felt like I could have a brother conversation. I definitely felt like they were somebody I looked up to. There was somebody that helped me get to where I am. And so just like you never want to make your parents, you never want to disappoint your parents. I always felt that pressure of, I don't want to disappoint my brothers. I'm curious if you felt any of that there, if your siblings had any.
First of all, we were a little bit closer together. There were 3 girls, my brother and myself.
Okay.
So my brother and myself, which were about 2 years apart, we were accomplices, in very many things. And the 3 girls, the oldest was 8 years older than I am. So it was not that big a difference at some point. But we were a closely knit family. We still are. A couple have passed away for different reasons. But I must say that my fatherly figure was very strong and he was always there. That's something that my mom managed to keep us. We would see each other weekly, have dinner together, Saturdays with the family and friends and boyfriends and girlfriends and whatever. So she did a great job in that sense. So we were pretty close. So other than fatherly or motherly figures, my brothers and sisters, we were just the bunch,
Yeah.
And that was fun. Nonetheless, we were all very independent. Javier was an actuario. How do you say it in English? I'm not sure.
Actually, for like insurance and.
Yeah, a lawyer, a hotel business thing. So there were different things happening and very respectful, everybody of what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it. And in that sense, we were closely knit, but very independent.
That's fantastic.
And obviously, it's not that we were very well off financially. We all worked from school, meaning arquitectura. I started working. My brother worked. My sister worked. But in that sense, we also kind of helped each other out and not basically saying money is an issue. We looked for each other, but we managed independently to take care of ourselves. So,
got it. So let's kind of dive into that. So you come back from school in Washington. You're in 7th grade. And at what point do you realize you want to get into architecture? What was the reason you got into architecture for university?
I did a lot of sports. And when you do sports, you realize that there are dimensions to things, that things have to work this way, that way. I guess for some other type of individuals, it's the engineering that gets you, why would this swivel, why would this move? To me, it was kind of spacious, but outdoorsy, And I must say, I mentioned at the beginning, I had a couple of friends that went into architecture older than me. And I kept saying, that's what I want. That makes sense. That's fun. And I don't know, it just kind of I applied for architecture school and got in and enjoyed it every single day. It was fun. I believe I had the pleasure of picking something I really liked, and it was fun. Ever since first semester, I started working with teachers, with different individuals, because I had to at some point. Not that I needed to, but I had to in the sense that I felt good doing it. And again, it's not that we were needy economically. My father took care of that pretty good. But it was also a sense of responsibility saying you have to look for your own. And that's how my father thought, and that's how we were raised up. So not needy, not, how could you say it? Not poor, but it was good to see for yourself and be able to make your own decisions and move along. No?
So while you were doing university for architecture, did you work any internships?
Yeah.
That's one of the questions that we asked.
All the time.
What were your experiences there?
That was fantastic. Like I say, it was with teachers. So it's people you look up to that you find with a certain click that I must say it this way. When there's empathy with someone, they treat you differently to the others.
Absolutely.
So when you're in a class and this guy, hey, why don't you come to work with me? And, sure. Or you go up and say, hey, can I go to your office? And, sure. What are you going to do? I don't know. Count clips, sharpen pencils. I don't care. I need to learn more and I need to get paid. And okay, let's do that. So that was part of it. Again, it was a job, but it was fun. And you get to meet people, and you get to meet architects, and you get to meet projects that are complicated and that are elsewhere, and travel. And so it was from day one. Yeah.
It's interesting about it's interesting you say that, because some of the advice that I tell people that are going into college or in college today, I remember 2 stories, and they're both around building the relationship and connection to people. The first one was I had a history class. It was, for me, math and science were my strong suit. That's why engineering, electrical engineering was my background. History and reading and geography were I struggled. I didn't enjoy it.
In the back burner.
And so I would spend a lot of time going into office hours for this history class, asking my professor just tons of questions and making sure that I was understanding the context. But a lot of it was building that relationship. And when the semester finished, I did my calculation of what I should have got. And I should have gotten like an 88 or an 89, like B plus. Mm-hmm. And it would have been the first B that I got in university. Up to that point, I had a 4.0. And the report cards come out, and he gave me an A. Yeah. And I knew I had earned a B. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't say anything. I wrote him a thank you card. Just said, and I didn't even address the grade. I just, I enjoyed your class. Thank you for the time. Very similar instance with my Physics 2 class. Physics 2 is one of the hardest classes you take as an undergrad.
Can imagine.
And spent a lot of time with the professor in their office. And he would drop little hints, like while we were working through homework, like, you really should pay attention to this problem because this part's important. You're like, okay. And sure enough,
making note,
that problem, slightly worded differently, was what you saw on the test. And so I always tell a lot of people, like, to your point, building that empathy, building the relationship. And as I got older, the boss that I look up to the most, I worked for him for 10 years at Google. He told me very early, Alfonso, that this industry is 80% people, 20% the what. Like, the what is the ticket to admission. It's why we're all here. You need to build the relationships. And, I think it's how I define success to my team now. Like the team that I lead, we help cut in all of the infrastructure globally for AI and ML. And I always tell the team, like, our definition to success should be when the project is done. If you ask the people that we worked with, would you do this all over again with the same people? If the answer is yes, we've succeeded. If the answer is no, I would not do that again with them. Doesn't matter if you're on time, if you're under budget, doesn't matter. Like, you left bodies along the way, and
deliver,
and that's not okay. So no,
I agree with you 100%.
So interesting you say that. Okay, so you got into architecture, you worked internships. Did you start Gaia right out of school, or did you go work somewhere beforehand?
During school.
You started Gaia during school?
My partner is 8 years older than I am.
So he was already out.
He was my teacher.
Okay.
He finished architecture at the same university.
Okay.
He was in the same class generation than the guys I worked for, meaning those teachers that gave me a job. And he was friends with them, but he left for England. Right on graduation day, he got on a plane, he went to England, and he stayed there for 4 years, which is the time that I ended up doing my studies. And when he comes back in the last semester, not the last year, he came in a scooter and he came in a motorcycle, and it was just a fun guy. And he gave us a class, corporate space planning. And I was like, okay, interesting. And that's a big story I'll tell you at some other point. But that's, I had been working freelancing construction for one of his generation architects, buddies, and they started doing things together. And that's when he was giving me classes. He was doing work with this old companion from his class. So, and we were friends, and he suddenly said, Guy, I'm leaving the British company. They're going out of Mexico, and I'm opening shop. Would you like to come over? And we became partners in my last year of school.
That's fantastic. And you've been a Gaya ever since. That's fantastic, Alberto.
2 internships I did in Boston for some architect, friend of my father at the MBA. He had me 2 summers.
Okay, in Boston. That's fantastic.
That was interesting. It was fun.
So you start your company, and do you go to Paris once you started it after you finished school?
1 year after I was in Paris.
And how long were you in
Paris? I got married in the meantime. Okay. And we left for Paris. And we stayed almost 2 years.
While you were in Paris, 100% school, or were you also doing work here in
That's
Mexico?
Another major story, because I was going to the company that Fernando had worked for in London, that he brought to Mexico, but eventually left. We opened Gaya, but the relationship with that firm was real good. It's just that Mexico didn't work for them. Yeah. So we called headquarters in London and said, guys, can we? Yeah, sure. Send Alberto to Paris. Good. We need him to learn. Okay. Fernando was good friends with the partners of, it's a company called DEGW, Duffy, LAG, Funny, and Worthington. They were the big corporate interior European company at that time. And they had a branch office all over Europe and some in Asia, one in New York. And I went to Paris, and that was fun. Interesting. Many things happened in those 2 years. But at some point I said, I need to go back and take care of our business. Other than, I've learned, now I know the methods, what the corporate global clients want, but in Mexico they can't find. So we brought it back.
So, Alberto, your time in Paris, was that working, when you say learning, was that learning on the job or also going to school?
No.
So you went to Paris to go work for this company.
For work.
And so you were learning hands-on.
Yeah, sure.
Got it.
No, taking care of projects, designing, implementing space planning methods, and interesting. We traveled quite a bit. I'll tell you, office space has changed dramatically ever since. There's just tons of things that you did then that nobody does now anyway, because technology has changed the way we work, and the habitats and the boxes that we use and the data that we transform into emotions somehow, So it's changed quite a bit, but I did learn a lot. And at that time it made sense, because in Mexico, like I say, we were in diapers in corporate space planning.
So you come back to Mexico, and now you've learned through working in Paris. I'm trying to guess your age at that point. You were probably mid-20s, late 20s?
Mid-20s.
Was there ever, because we get this concept a lot, Alberto, like in English, it's called imposter syndrome, which is where you, and I still get it all the time, to be transparent and honest. Like, and I feel like there's a strength in admitting it. Is there strength in being vulnerable enough to say it, where you realize, like, am I really good enough to be doing this? Like, are people going to realize tomorrow that, like, how did he get there? Did you ever go through imposter syndrome, kind of coming back? I mean, you're pretty young at this point. You own your own company. getting into the space. You're doing things, from what I hear, very differently to what anybody in Mexico was doing at the time. Did you ever get a sense of imposter syndrome, or were you just kind of like, it is what it is, I'm going to do what I do?
I'd never heard the concept
term?
or the term. But to tell you the truth, it's interesting to see that, for example, with my family, my father, Fernando, my partner, being the way they are, I always felt safe and someone had my back. Not that they're giving you any presents. They're just saying, here's the opportunity, grab it. And I believe that's what we did. In the case of my partner, he wasn't given anything also. It was through hard work and, should we do this? Should we do that? No. It sounds simple, but sometimes I must say, you do make some decisions irresponsibly, which now at 59, I wouldn't take, no? I take a different path, or safer, or I guess safer is the term, because you take risks like crazy if you really want to grow at that time with what elements you have. Now the expectance of what we do as a large, mid-sized corporation, with the risk factors of construction, the risk factors of employees, families, if you start adding it up, you could go crazy. But the reality is that there's always been good intention in making it better, more professional, and make it seamless for the basics to be there for everybody. Meaning our employees, our co-workers, our teammates, our partners. And the differential has to be a little bit more that has the Gaya way, but the Gaya way is people. I keep telling, and going back to the term you mentioned, people at some point never realized how young we were when they were signing contracts with us. There were some facilities managers. Texas Instruments was our very first corporate client. And when the facilities guy came to Mexico from the US, and where are the architects? It's like, here we are. You guys are Fernando and Alberto, come on. How old are you? It was weird. Yeah. But we were there and we did the proposal, we did the writing, we did the contracting, we did everything right. And he said, boy, and Gaia, how big is Gaia? Plus 2 more. It was like
4 people.
Really? Am I hiring you? Yeah, you are.
That's awesome.
It was fun. To us, it was fun. It might have been irresponsible for him to sign the contract, not for us. But we delivered the goods and they became a recurring client. And boy, oh boy, it was a differential having one under the belt, no? Texas Instruments. And we learned a lot also.
I bet you that must have been, once you get that first one, it just kind of like, it gives you the confidence to go after the next one. And you know you've done it well.
And you realize that you have to jump into everything. I was the guy doing the proposals. I was the guy doing the contract signing and reading and understanding and having lawyer friends or uncles saying, can we do this? Should we do that? Why? Because that's how you start. Yeah. And there's this cartoon that first base, Bugs Bunny, second base, Bugs Bunny, third base, Bugs Bunny. Guess who's the pitcher? Yeah, Bugs Bunny. Yeah. You have to do that, no?
So I want to fast forward. So you get going, you're at this point, you're in the design space, you get into the design build space eventually. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of mentioned that you kind of make a decision to just pivot strictly to construction. Mm-hmm. What year was that in your journey as a company?
It must have been 98, I guess, 2000.
So 10, 12 years into the business.
Kind of.
Okay.
And it was a very, in the small community of corporate interiors, it was criticized, but also applauded. But to us, it was a business decision. We do love planning and designing. That's what architects supposedly love and cherish, no?
That's what I was going to dig into. Like, you being an architect, you went to school for the opposite of what you're doing now, which probably makes you a better builder as a result of it. But
I'll tell you, it sure does.
But you don't get to do what you went to school for anymore, kind of.
It's funny because at the beginning we had to be very, very, very strict in not looking at other people's plates. If I invited you as an architect to pursue a contract, it would be a design build contract, what the client wanted, but I'd say, we're doing the design with these guys. So we had the size and the stamina and the recognition in the market to do design build processes for corporate interiors, but we bring someone along. And to tell the truth, we come back to the trust factor. Who am I signing the contract with? Gaya? Okay. Who's the leader and who's my single source of responsibility? Blah, blah, blah. I don't care who you hire. Sometimes that's what happened or happens. But then again, the trust factor is the important thing. Deliver the goods, no matter if you're teaming up with someone. And then they started inviting us. Those architects started saying, hey, man, why don't we team up on that and that and that and that? So that's been fun. And we've worked with, Ricardo Legorreta and Victor, his son, Legorreta Arquitectos, Agustin Hernandez at some point. We've done museums. We've done with different people. So the teaming up has worked perfectly. And I believe that's something that is going to be happening more and more in every discipline and in every segment of the market. Again, the idea that the architect can manage absolutely any project, I believe it's changing. And it's maturing into specialties for certain things. So the flexibility we have as a general contractor is, okay, I can take care of your process, but what is it you want? A museum? These guys know museums. These guys don't. So that's interesting.
So I'm interested to kind of dig into some concepts that we normally talk about, Alberto. One of them is mentorship, and I'm curious first to understand who are the mentors in your life that you've had or across your career. And then kind of the second part question is you've been in an interesting position where if you think of a hierarchy, if you think of a totem pole, you've been at the top of that totem pole since you started your career because you're a partner. So I'm kind of curious how you've kind of thought about being a mentor to and a leader to your team as you've gone from early 20s starting a company to now. You've been in business for 30 years. You probably have leaders that you've hired to run your organization for you. So I'm really curious first on the personal side, who were those mentors and what were those themes that I think were important to you? Because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are looking for a mentor. They're trying to figure out how do they start that mentorship process. It's kind of uncomfortable to have that conversation like, hey, Alberto, I'd love for you to be my mentor. Like, you just don't get that question and people don't ask that.
Yeah, they don't.
So I'm curious to see like who are the people that you think or you think about your mentors, who are they and how did you establish those relationships?
I must say that if we go way back, definitely my father. Obviously, he was a very strong fatherly figure with a kind of stubborn way of thinking, but like I say, as time goes by, you say there was a reason for his madness, and it was a very peculiar and particular style. I learned tons of him. Secondly, I must say my brother. He passed away from cancer about 10 years ago, but just being about a year and 8 months apart, we were close. He was more into books, I was more into sports. So we were kind of, and he would used to say, we were Cain and Abel. Pick. To him, we were Cain and Abel, have a pick. But the relationship and the mentorship was interesting. He was a lot into financial and math. And he gave us tremendously good advice business-wise. So did my father at some point for Gaya. And I must say, Fernando Gutierrez, my partner. I mean, like I say, he's a different generation in the sense of the studies we did in architecture, but he's always been my mentor and relentless, and regardless of upcomings, downgoings, whatever situation, dialogue has been constant, trust has been constant. And I must say, and that's what keeps us on our toes, is innovation. And a word that in business sometimes is criticized, and I tend to use it a lot, fun. If you don't have fun doing what you do, if there's no passion in understanding that, yes, they are long hours, but they're fun hours, change your job, change 100%. Your line of duty, change something, because you're going to be miserable. So through these mentorships and these people, with all the seriousness and the dedication, fun has always been part of it. And it helps to realize that work can be fun and that fun can be work. To me, that's something that some of these mentors have managed to understand when I place it on their laps, and they give it back like saying, but you have to be, yes, but have fun. Those are common denominators with these guys. And I must say, in the professional side, we had the pleasure of meeting some facilities managers or some clients that take care of processes and projects that were very patient, that were very, call it homey. How could you say, that they
welcoming,
yes, this is a job. We are signing a contract. But listen, this is what's important to me. This is what's important to the corporation. This is what's important for the process. And somebody opening up like that, it is a mentorship, whether you realize it or not. It's not strictly contracts. And Alberto, I see you down. What's going on?
That's a deep.
You missed your cue. We were supposed to. Are you okay? When it gets to that, it's like somebody's worrying about you. It's different than just a client-vendor relationship, no? And it tends to happen quite a bit that we become friends with our clients. And those friends not necessarily are people that you're going to go party. Those friends are someone you trust, and that if you need some advice, you can call upon. So I guess that's also mentorship somehow, no? I have guys that have retired because they were quite a few years older than I am, and we're still in contact.
Yeah.
And we still talk to each other and, hey, how you doing? You're coming to Mexico. Yeah, how's the bank? How's the whatever, no? Interesting. And I call those mentorships because regardless of the position or the contract, you can call and ask for advice. That's to me, that's important.
That's a fantastic way of putting it, Alberto. For us, like if you think of the Lighthouse and the people that put it together, it's a collection of people that work together. And in one place, somebody was the owner, somebody was the architect, somebody was the client. But I go back and I recommend, if you haven't watched the interview with Freddie, you should.
Mm-hmm.
In that, I talk about he was the architect, I was on the owner side, but he was my mentor during that whole process.
Okay.
So
sure.
I was young. I was in my early 20s. It just started. When I tell this story, he would come in, and I was the only one that spoke Spanish on the owner side, and he had learned English, but he had a really thick accent, and he struggled with some words. And so I was the translator, if you will, because I was so young that I probably shouldn't have been in the room where some of the conversations.
But you were.
But I was.
That's the important.
Because for me, it was a fantastic learning opportunity. So I would help translate. And then in the evenings, kind of after everybody left, 5 or 6 o'clock, Freddie would always be like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? And we'd go walk the project. And he'd literally ask, do you know what that is? No, I don't know what that is. That's a conduit. Do you know what that is? Yeah, that's switchgear. Hey, let me show you this breaker. Here's what it does. Here's how it works. Every time he'd visit the site, we'd do an hour or 2 hour walk. And I would take notes. But think about it. He was the architect, the engineer. I was the owner. Like it should have been the other way. But no.
Nonetheless, it's worthwhile.
And that was 20.
And it's time consuming, yes.
20 years ago.
But again,
yes,
it was also fun.
It was. We had a blast together.
I'm sure it was also fun. Yeah. I must say, we've been at it 38 years in a market that's, at least for corporate interiors, is kind of tight, not huge. If you get an opportunity and the blessing of tending a client, that client won't come back in 10 years. It's not like in the US you have, I don't know, a lawyer's firm that has the New York office, the San Francisco office, the Miami office, and no. There's one shot at it, no? So you'd best do the best you can day one, not only in selling and promoting, but also in tending and delivering, no? The important thing here is we've been at it 38 years and we've had tons of people. We're a great school. People, Laris, you know what, Fernando, I'm moving on my own. I'm opening my own shop. Good luck. Yeah. Let's hope we meet in the competition side and shake hands and have a beer. And so we've been a good cantera, how do you say?
Springboard.
A good springboard for everybody.
People, yeah.
And the relationships are fantastic. If you could call that mentorship at some point, yes, because they've opened up shop and they still call us and how you doing? Hey, we're meeting on this. We're going to be against on that. Well, sorry, that's market and that's life and good for you. Now you're playing on our league. That's fantastic. There's room for everybody.
That's a good example. And you got me thinking about a topic that's come up during our interview. So Whenever we've had interviews with people, and we've heard from some of our listeners that they work both in Latin America, Mexico specifically, and they also work in the States. They describe the cultures are very different, and so kind of the if I were to put it from a summary perspective, in Mexico, Latin America, it's a very direct culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more, I wouldn't say in your face, but a little bit more like, I need to get your attention to make sure you know what I need you to go do. Where here, it's a little bit more scaled back. It's maybe I'll use the word soft. Like you have to, your interpersonal skills matter more. How you get somebody's attention and how you have maybe hard conversations, you have to be very, very careful about. Mm-hmm. And that has been a topic of themes for people that have either gone from here to there and have struggled to be listened to and be taken seriously because they're not as maybe forceful, or vice versa. People that have spent time in Latin America come to the U.S., they get coached that, hey, I need you to not be so direct. I need you to kind of be a little nicer to your coworkers. I'm curious with you guys working with global clients. You've done, obviously your upbringing was in Mexico. You've done work in Paris. How have you bridged that gap to understand the differences in culture, and what has been your experience in that?
Interesting question, because the markets, contrary to 25, 30 years ago, they've become a melting pot. I find that not only age has changed in the sense of who we do business and we relate to, and by doing business, it's not only the client side. It's the project manager, it's the designer, the architect, it's the engineering that do the calculations and the engineering stuff. It's the vendors, it's the supplying chain. It's first they keep getting younger, so we are dealing. I'm becoming the old generation. I'm close to 60. Actually, I'm 60 in June, so I am becoming the older generation. Age is one factor. The other one is communication. Communication has bridged the distance for us somehow, because they might not travel as much, but they are knowledgeable of what's going on in different branch offices, representation offices. The guys in certain teams, you feel like you've been to Singapore? No, but I know the office. I know these two guys. They've shown me. And it's like, wow. So culturally speaking, things are leveling off and blending a little bit. When you get down to earth and construction, I mean, there's nothing more down to earth than talking to a plumber, a whatever, no? Those workers still are also better communicated. And if you feel that you are really doing something manpower-wise, that's where I've seen the most changes in attitude, in capacitating people, in teaching people the do's and the don'ts. Safety, health, on site have changed dramatically. I mentioned there weren't any helmets. Now they are hard hats all over the place. Access means for security, who goes in, who doesn't. Many things that relate to education and that eventually become part of the culture. And that's something we enforce a lot in Gaya. We try to make sure that everybody understands. First of all, for example, something we do that people don't really get. Why would you give some lectures explaining what are we building and for whom? They don't care if it's a bank. No, they do. The thing is, you don't care of letting them know what they're doing. It's not just a big box of concrete. It's a data center. Do you know what a data center is? No. Well, it's to process information. And they're like grateful for small little details that change your background and your culture. I think it's bridging. I think it's more communication through digital means. But I also think that if we were to get the opportunity of doing exactly this, traveling a little, which is easier nowadays, or at least there's more flights all over the place. It takes very little to bridge the culture. And it's a matter of, again, this word, trust.
So I guess let me maybe ask the question more directly. If I was to go if I needed to go work in Mexico next month, it was the first time I was going to be working in Mexico, I was going to be helping lead a team that's building a data center, for example. What advice would you give me if I told you like, hey, I've never worked in Mexico. I've only worked in the States. what advice would you give me on how to approach the teams, how to engage? What kind of advice would you give for anybody, especially for our listeners that have are in our part of the world, but are working with a presence in Latin America?
I'd say, and this is not just like we say in Spanish, from my teeth out, but it is interesting. Mexicans tend to be friendly people. Why? Because we are very much family oriented. We believe that family values are of the utmost importance. The motherly figure is untouchable. So mother is mother. If you say something about somebody's mother, watch out. And what I mean by this is eventually your sisters and your daughters are going to become mothers.
Yeah.
And the motherly figure is very, very important. One of the biggest insults you can say is to someone's mom. Yeah. Not to you personally, to someone's mom.
Yeah.
That's how strong the motherly figure is. And why do I bring this up? Because at the end, people tend to be friendly because of that background on that particular way of saying things. If you look at that Virgen de Guadalupe, it's a she.
Yeah,
it's a motherly figure again. It's very interesting. It's cultural. So my advice would be give people a chance to communicate, whether it's in your language or not. People that have traveled to Mexico or people on the contrary that have traveled to the US or understand the English culture in their own very particular way, try to speak English, even if they don't do it real good. So give them the chance. They might not speak it as fluent and as well as you guys do, but they try. And by trying, they are trying to be friendly and saying, I speak English. Yeah. Some Americans say, okay, forget it. Let's do it just be patient. And people will try to be friendly in that sense. The other one is food. Boy, food is of the utmost importance. Whether it's a very humble little taco plate to a sophisticated dinner, wherever, food is culturally important to Mexicans. You'd find it in all levels of society. If you gather around food, the defenses go down and people relax. So if you're heading a team, I don't know how large a size team, take the meeting and let them pick where. They're going to try to do their best in that friendly manner to say, we're going to have the best barbacoa. Yeah. Let me show. Might not be the best. It might be the best to him. But that's one way of them saying, this is us showing you.
Yeah.
You know? And the other one is interesting, but alcohol. People have tequila, people have beer, people have, yes, they do. It is in our culture. If you compare it to the US, it's a little bit different because there's more hard liquor in those meals than beers and things, which is in the US, no? But I must mention it is. And also our weather. It is very different from what you guys are used in the US. Perhaps not South and Central America, but Mexico has tremendously good climate. And that's something to benefit of and that people are proud of. You can go to the beach, you can go to the blah, 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 blah. And they're proud of their weather. It's interesting to mention, but all those snows, those tornadoes, those hurricanes, those whatever, those happen up north. Yeah. They don't happen down here. Here we get rain if we get something, no?
That's fantastic. Okay. How about if I were to turn that question the other way? Alberto, if you have somebody that's coming to the United States to work for the first time that maybe have spent their whole career in Mexico, what advice would you give them for our listeners that are kind of maybe nervous about the culture in the United States from what you've learned in your experience working with companies all over the world?
I think the biggest barrier would be the language. So if you're planning on coming up here, do the best to crash course English. English is not that complicated, to tell you the truth, compared to when I had to learn French. And French is a romantic language similar to Mexico, to Spanish, Latin, no? But English, we've had it in our culture in Mexico. All the movies, all the TV shows, all the music is in English. Somehow we've been exposed to English. So the ear for Mexicans to try and speak English, we have it. Somehow. I know I'm being simplistic. People that don't speak the language might say, this guy's weird, no? But if you put an effort to it and you're planning on coming and have the time and means, you can do it online.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not very expensive, or you don't need a professor and blah, blah, blah. You can do it online. Now learn a language, not only English. That would be my first recommendation. The other one is, how do you say it in English? Resilience. I mean, you are going to get bothered for the mere fact that you're either dark-skinned, they know that you're from Mexico, they know that you don't speak the language. Just be patient. People at the end recognize people for who they are. And that's some of the fairness that I find in the US. Eventually, when they realize you're fine, you're okay, you're good. I mentioned my coming in through sports at that young age. If you can manage some sports league, something to blend in with the locals, it helps. The US does tremendous amount of sports. It's a huge industry in every single way you look at it. No, whether you practice it, it's easy to find the tools and the things and go do some sport. You know, even public schools, you can go in and use the facilities even if you're not at the school. This I know for my years over there in Washington. So blend in as much as you can in the sense of doing what they are used to doing, no? And they're pretty receptive.
Fantastic, Alberto. You know, I'm curious to kind of change the topic just a little bit, go back to the mentorship, or maybe because you're in an interesting position with your company. As you're looking to hire your team members, what are the things that you look for? Like if you're interviewing somebody right now, what are the things that you look for in people that are wanting to get, and I would say both from entry level. We have a lot of our listeners that are in college today, are studying architecture, starting engineering. What are the things that you look for an entry level person? And then also, what are the things that you look for if you're looking to hire an executive in your corporation to come help be kind of right under you to lead your company? What are those things that you look for in those individuals?
It's interesting that you asked that, but it's got to do with how technical they have to be. And those are certain, there's a checklist of the musts, technically speaking. For example, it's known that we have great engineers in Mexico. As you remember, we are in an earthquake zone. So the technicality for building and calculating structures is very high level. So technically, we realize that if we can go through the checklist, technically, we don't have any problem in Mexico. Now, for specifics in certain areas within the construction company, we try to understand values of the people. And in the interviews, it depends on what area or what segment of market we're going to be going into. If you don't have certain specific values of partnership, ownership, sharing, we have this called 100. Honesty, transparency, honestidad, transparencia, ética. It works in English and in Spanish. Honestidad, transparencia, ética, honesty, transparency, and ethics.
Ethics.
And we try and not only hire 100% 100 people, we deliver services 100% 100 to our clients. And that's a word we came up with because it works in English and Spanish.
That's awesome.
Honestidad, transparencia, y ética. And it involves a lot. And like I say to our human resources team, you have to be our employee's best friend. Meaning, not everything is money. Not everything is revenue. By money, I mean your salary or your expectations of bonuses or whatever. And not everything is revenue for the company. We need to level things off. If people want to be happy again and have fun in their work, there are certain checklist things that have to be taken care of by us, but there are certain others that have to be taken by them in the sense of, I expect this from the company, but we expect this from you. Yeah. So it's a two-way street, and there's got to be a lot of dialogue. Let me put an example. A pregnant woman, no? Years ago, it was like, oh, she's pregnant, she's leaving that. No. How can we take care of this pregnant lady that's going to have a child, and we want her back? Why? Because she's tremendous talent. She's done wonderful things. Well, now we'll get two. No, and the old ways used to be like, we don't know if she's coming back. No, we want her back. Why? She's having a baby. Fantastic. How can we be of help and interest her in coming back after her maternity leave? No? Maternity leaves, paternity leaves, they're happening now. No, those things are evolving, and it's important to understand. And this I say both to my prospect clients, to my clients, and to our staff, our team of people. The best asset and the biggest tool, most differentiated tool we have is our people. That's where we need to invest money. We don't even own a hammer. We're a construction company. We're a general contracting company. When you realize that as an employer or a potential client, it's like, whoa, that's real.
Your assets, your people.
Absolutely. And then again, we don't have all the answers, Fernando, myself, or the managing part of the company. We try to think that it's very horizontal, and we encourage people to talk, to have those 40-minute walks, to have a lunch, to understand the subcontractors' issues and why would they do this and not that, and what is the pricing on this and not that, what's the quality on this and not that. If you see the layout in our office space, there's a lot of places to gather around in different modes, standing, sitting, laying, whatever, because we promote communication. Obviously, the pandemic had a lot to do with separate, don't interact, don't look. But now, again, I say, it's nice to have an email with an answer, but it's better to have a relationship with someone. That's why you can look at each other in the eye and say, I trust this guy, I don't. I'm not sure, no. But going back to hiring people, we also have a psychometric exam done. We've realized that people have become very good at showing papers and talking about themselves, but we need a more scientific approach to, is this guy a serial killer or not?
Fantastic.
To tell you the truth.
So you guys have them take a psychometric test?
Everybody.
Wow.
Every potential employee takes a psychometric test.
How often do people get screened out because of that? It's very often. Okay.
Because it's not that people are serial killers or weirdos. It's that the profile mentioned here, the interview and reading the psychometrics
just doesn't align.
This is not good for sales. He knows that we need somebody in sales. That's why he started answering this, but his true self is this guy. This is not what we need. Sorry, thank you very much. No.
Fantastic, Alberto. Okay, so you guys have them take a psychometric test.
Every single, if you're close to being hired, because they do cost money. You get a psychometric, and your immediate teammates and whatever get to understand the do's, the don'ts, and where you can reinforce what to expect and how to do it, and you get hired. If not, back. We've had exceptions where we didn't do it way back when. Now everybody does. But I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, and it was like, who hired this guy?
That's incredible. That's a big commitment on your side. But if you think about, we always tell anybody that's on the team or any of the teams that I work with, making the wrong hire is almost worse than any decision you can make or not make.
And something that happened during the pandemic, we as well as many other construction companies in Mexico, at least, we had to shrink. We had to let people go, and it hurt so much in the sense that I know this guy, I know his family, I know his wife, but either we keep steering the ship or the ship sinks. No, it was a business decision, and it hurt to let people go. Well, we're on the hiring mode again. Fortunately, we've done certain things. We did manage the storm, the pandemic, and it's interesting to see that people that eventually got co-location in other places are saying, I'm ready. And that's,
I want to come back.
Guys, wow, we didn't want to this. No. But I'm ready. I want to go back to Gaia. And that's very satisfying because they felt comfortable. They knew the circumstances and the decisions that had to be made. But some of them, I call them the boomerang employees. I get it. There's a publication by Art Gensler. I'm sure you know who he is.
Gensler, yeah.
And he has a chapter saying the boomerang employees are the best employees. If they come back, it's because they learned something and they cherish something that you planted and now it could blossom. So it's interesting that they went back.
Okay. I'm curious. I'm just looking at the time to make sure we make the best use of our time. I want to get into one more topic, but I'll ask you this question. As you think about who's going to take over for Gaia, like what are those things eventually when you're ready to retire, whenever that may be? What are those things that you look for in that next person that? And I think of the question from the perspective of a lot of our listeners are in their career today. They're in that middle manager world, and so they're not quite at the top yet. But they're a little bit higher than entry level. And so I'm just kind of curious. Like you're in an interesting place. You're going to be looking to eventually turn over a company that you built from the ground up. And so I'm kind of curious, like what goes into that thought process for you?
It's interesting you ask because we're already in the process. Remember Fernando, he's 8 years older than I am. And it's something that the pandemic at some point came to a parenthesis in everybody's life and said, what are we doing good, right, wrong? What should we be doing differently? No. And we dedicated a lot of time to this, not interviewing formally and not recording, but talking to different clients, suppliers, co-teammates, architects, designers, engineers, whatever. And we started asking exactly what could happen in the industry, what should we be doing, are you comfortable with, la, la, la. And we came up with a plan for implementing in a more, how could you say, strict or specific way, ESG principles, which we already had in mind and implemented some of them. But we formally understood that environment, social, and governance had a lot to do with what we are concerned of, not only doing on a day-to-day basis, but leaving on a good track, safe, sound, and positive, moving forward if we were to, leave the company, inherit the company, sell the company, whatever, no? So we've done a lot in governance. I must say it is a group of companies and not just Gaya. We have a group of companies for different things that are related to construction, but it's different group of things. Fortunately enough, our 5 kids, meaning 3 of mine, and 2 of Fernando, have been involved for the past 10 years in our board meetings. It's interesting, if you look at Maite, my daughter, she's 26 and she's been there since she was 16. So it was like, at first it was drawing, like, who are these guys? And all the old silverback guys. But we've established a good governance corporate structure. We do have board meetings. We do have trimester meetings. We do have corporate plans. We do have a lot of things that have to do with good governance. So in that, we score pretty good. In the social part, like the Lighthouse, I believe we've gone up, down, and it depends on, and the pandemic really blocked quite a few things. But I believe we have it in our DNA. We try and share it, and I was about to say enforce it, but no, it's share it with employees that come up with ideas and say, what can we do? No? And it's been interesting to start talking to clients saying from day one, even if we're not hired yet, that we would like to devote a certain percentage of the revenue to a social program jointly. And it's raised some eyebrows saying, that'd be fantastic. You'd be willing to? Yes, we'd be willing to. The thing is to find the programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like the Lighthouse and see where we can help downstairs.
Absolutely.
Down there in South. And the part of environment, we have lead APs. We've done lead certifications all over the place ever since it started, some 20-some years ago. We know some of the key players that began, up there in Seattle and whatever. And it's been fun. It's been learning. That's awesome. But we clearly understand we need to take it a step further and first do more consciousness in that sense with the whole environment of where we do business, but also internally. I believe that we've lost some of our champions, meaning through the shrinking and changing of command, but we need to reinforce that a little bit more through walking the walk and not talking the talk. I don't know. And that has a lot to do with projects and clients getting involved. I believe that's the best stamina that could happen. No?
Fantastic. So 2 more questions for you just to make sure we finish on time. What does Gaia stand for? Like, how did you come up with the name?
It's interesting because Fernando started the company. He registered Gutierrez, Arensburg y Asociados, Gaya. But the register is Gaia. And at first we came up with a logo, G-A and A. G-A-I-A.
For Alberto.
No. Gutierrez, Arensburg y Asociados.
okay.
Fernando is Gutierrez, Arensburg.
Okay.
He's Fernando Gutierrez, Arensburg. And I said, Fernando, this is a lawyer's name. I mean, Gutierrez, they can't even pronounce it. So why don't we go through Gaia? And we said, okay, Gaia. And
so that's Gaia. Okay.
At the beginning, it was G-A-I-A. G-A and A with an ampersand.
Yeah.
We changed the logo when we turned 30. That was 8 years ago to Gaia. Why? Because everybody called us Gaia.
Yeah.
So if you cannot beat them, join them.
I love it, Alberto. Okay. As we wrap up, I'm curious to kind of ask you this parting question. If you had any advice to give to anybody of our listeners about just any career advice, any things that you think are important, what would you say those things are?
First of all, you have to understand what you like, what you want, but also what you don't like and you don't want. I find a lot of young guys doing things that they don't really understand or like or enjoy, and they're being a little bit miserable just for the fact that the check is coming every 15 days. Come on, guys. It's much more to life than that. Try doing what you know, what you understand, and what you like. And if something you haven't learned, learn it. We have so many means of studying, of relating, of communicating. And the more you can do eye to eye, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
The mentoring we were talking about, I kept thinking of the big mentors you asked me about. It was eye to eye. And body language has a lot to do with how you plant or present your queries and questions, but also the feedback. If you get the opportunity to talk to people eye to eye, that's a major difference. Understand what you like, understand what you don't. And the other thing is that, like this Nike brand, go for it. Don't pull back. A lot of guys in Mexico, at least, are shying away from entrepreneurship because the big corporations and the big checks are already there at a very early age, and they don't want to go on their own. And I say, you'll never get the second chance to try it on your own. And success cases are still all over the place. And you don't need to be a unicorn company. You don't need to have billions to spend and become the next WeWork. See where that brought them. But go for it. If there's something that you really feel you understand, you enjoy, and could make a difference in any market, at least try it. Talk to people and say, I'm going to do this. Can you kind of help me out? Can you kind of have my back? Can you kind of, and look for it. Go for it. It's important. It might make a major difference, not only as the big next huge business, but it might make a difference for you in realizing that you are capable, that you can do it. And if the business doesn't go good, at least you tried and you're a better person to try something else. But age has a lot to do with entrepreneurship. If you don't do it when you're young, you'll get used to certain things of the good life that might not allow you to try that entrepreneurship, no?
Fantastic, Alberto. Well, thank you very much for your time. I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
How can Gaia be of help to the Lighthouse?
Yeah. So
how do you envision that we could get a little bit involved and start, chipping away on the block and saying, where can we pull the thread? How can we start? Absolutely.
There's a couple of things that come to mind, Alberto. First is one of the things we always do, and it's a surprise, but I'll share it with you. We on our side try to put our money where our mouth is, and so we'll actually be starting a scholarship at your high school in Mexico in support for you. The application, they have to listen to this interview and to talk about what they learned from somebody that actually went to school where they're going to school. And so we do that for all of our speakers as a thank you. We do it with we donate money to do that. And so we're doing that. And so obviously any support there would help do that, but we're going to be doing that for you. And I'm excited to share that. Two is we're looking for our three pillars are mentorship. And so one of the options that Gaia can do, not only yourself but your team members, is to be willing to be a mentor. And so there's a lot of young people that are joining Ola Data that are in the architecture space and the construction space and the engineering space. We're just looking to pair them with somebody that's in already a leadership position to kind of have these kinds of conversations. And to have something like, hey, I have a question, Alberto. I'm going through this situation at work. I want to just ask some questions.
Great.
So it's that opportunity. I think the other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get people put in places. And so as we have kids coming out of college, we're making a network so we can share resumes, so that as you have positions that you need filled, whether it's in Mexico or here in the States, we can help fill those positions. And then the last one is scholarships. And so obviously we're looking to put scholarships not only in the States, but also in Mexico. This coming year, we're going to be launching in Peru, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Canada.
Fantastic.
Because all of our speakers, and Chile, because all of our speakers are coming from different places.